Well, hello there, and welcome to today's episode of the Power of Your Mind podcast. You are listening to episode number 284. I love that number. It's got two of my favorite numbers in it. I love even numbers. Anyway, I'm Victoria Gallagher. I'm the Law of Attraction hypnotist and #1 best-selling author of Practical Law of Attraction. Align yourself with the manifesting conditions and successfully attract your desires. I'm also the founder of HipTalk.com and HypnoCloud apps, and also the soon to come Believe app, which gives you access to many, many recordings right in the palm of your hand. So be sure to download those apps from the app stores. And today I have a very special guest with me, Theresa Lear Levine.
Levine.
Levine, you know what? There's a little typo here in my script. Sorry. Anyway, so Theresa's battles with traumas, high functioning anxiety, and ADHD trapped her in a recurring Groundhog Day of disease, distraction, and dissatisfaction. A transformative pivot came when exhaustion, insomnia, and the struggle to be present in her own abundantly blessed life broke her down. Driven to embrace life's potential and achieved aligned success, Theresa delved into decoding her nervous system, also the law of attraction and the subconscious mind, through emotional freedom techniques, hypnotherapy, and a fresh perspective on energy and manifestation. Theresa swiftly shed the negative emotions and expanded her consciousness. This restoration brought back the calm, clarity, and confidence. I love all these three words in a row that became a foundation for success. And in Theresa's book, Becoming More Me, Tapping into Success, Subconscious Secrets of an ADHD Entrepreneurial Mom, was born out of her passion to help other like-minded women on their quest to ditch anxiety, limiting beliefs, and past trauma. And as an EFT practitioner and master practitioner and hypnotherapist, Theresa implements a unique and integrative approach to nervous system regulation, subconscious mind work, law of attraction, and energy strategy. And she can be found on the website becomemoreme.com. She also has a podcast, which I was recently featured on, or am going to be featured on. Either way, we've met
It's out.
before.
It's out.
It's out. And she can also be found on Instagram at the
Theresa
uh,
Lear Levine.
there we go. Yeah, you know what? It's so interesting. You see the in your name there. Okay, so yeah, Theresa Lear Levine. All right. So without further ado, let's go ahead and bring Theresa on. Teresa's going to be sharing some of her insights on cultivating calm, clarity, and confidence as the foundation for success. So welcome to the show, Theresa.
Oh, thanks so much for having me, Victoria. It's a pleasure.
Yeah, it's such a pleasure. Such a pleasure to reconvene and talk about your book and talk about your story. And let's just dive into your
Yeah.
story, on how this all came about for you.
Yeah, absolutely. So I've always been a personal development junkie. I think we talked about that a bit when you were on my show because you share that with me. And for the longest time, I would feel like I was able to learn a lot. I'm smart, I take things in and make sense of them logically and rationally, and yet I would still remain stuck or be making these decisions that just weren't quite aligned with the outcome I was looking for, not getting the results I wanted. And that continued for much of my life. I ended up having this kind of major pivot around the time that my youngest son, who's about 7 now, I was, pregnant with him, and just realizing, man, I've got 4 boys now, and a very
Wow, that's
blessed
a
life.
handful. No,
It,
no girls, all
no
all just
girls,
boys.
so
Oh,
4
wow.
boys, 2 male dogs, and a husband. So I get to be the queen of the castle, which is kind
Yes.
of cool, actually. But around that time when I was carrying him, I was just really in that lack mindset, and I was feeling like, man, there's so much good stuff going on in my life, so many blessings, so much abundance, and yet I wasn't really connecting with it.
Mhm.
And I was feeling really separate from the things that I wanted to bring into my physical reality, probably because I was not focusing in the right places, as we all know too well now. But I
Absolutely.
didn't understand all of that quite at that time. And that's when I also kind of discovered nervous system regulation, which was just
Mhm.
a foreign thing to me before that. So before it was like I was trying to learn things and kind of cram all this knowledge into my head and make it be worth something in my physical reality. And then when I brought my body into it, my brain, that connection, the meridians, all of that, it was like everything became actionable. All the places where I had those energetic blockages, I was able to remove them. I was able to understand my feelings so much more and just literally started showing up in my life in a different way. Whether it was the way I was parenting, my patience, my ability to, do more in my business and expand there,
Wow.
all these different things, my marriage, all these things just started experiencing these great, up levelings. And, through that, I also became a practitioner in law of attraction and, learned hypnotherapy and kind of brought all of those things together, realizing what a huge difference that, bringing that subconscious mind work into play made in every area of my life.
Yeah.
So that was kind of the big pivot. And that's a lot of what I talk about in my book.
Absolutely. So you were going through, you were really struggling with feeling that feeling of abundance. You were really kind of feeling pretty overwhelmed, I imagine,
Yes.
and just not really sure of how you were going to like connect yourself to the things that you wanted. How
Yeah.
did you even like how did it even come about to look into the nervous system? Like, how did that even come into your awareness?
I think it's a matter of when the student is ready, the teacher appears.
Yeah.
And I think that, it was interesting because the method that I love the most for nervous system regulation is emotional freedom techniques or EFT tapping. And that's been around since the 90s. It's been around for a pretty long time and it's got roots in ancient Chinese wisdom and things that have been around for thousands of years. And yet, when it was brought into my awareness earlier,
Yeah.
I would see it being used with Olympic athletes, or I would see it being used with war veterans, and I got into that comparative mindset of, oh, well, my issues as a housewife and, entrepreneur that works from home are nothing compared to, what these people are doing, these monumental things and these horrible traumas and things. So I was like, oh, this must not apply to me. What I didn't realize until I just kind of serendipitously ended up at a retreat for the health and fitness business that I was doing my coaching in at the time was that you can use that technique to work on anything that you can feel,
Yeah.
much like hypnotherapy.
Yeah.
So, I was able to make the connection there that whether it was something in the past, something happening presently in my life, or something that I was anxious and future pacing about, and also whether it was something physical pain, because I had a bunch of car accidents in my 20s and things that
Mhm.
kind of really the physical injuries were painful, but I think the mental issues that came from kind of being put in a place of being less able to do things was
Yeah.
harder for me than anything. So I could work on the physical, I could work on the mental, and it didn't, nothing was off limits. And there was this scientific effectiveness that had been proven with these techniques to make amazing leaps and bounds with these things. So I just started, no pun intended, tapping into all these different things that I wanted to resolve. And it was like amazing, even if you just choose like one little thing each day to kind of peel a little layer back on, the difference you can make in a week, a month, a
Oh,
year.
yeah.
You know how that goes.
Absolutely. No, I've dabbled a little bit in some EFT, just like there had been times in my life, not too, in not the too distant past where I was feeling very anxious and I just like literally I did not know even, my own hypnotherapy techniques. Sometimes you just need something else, and something you need
Or you get
sometimes you
resistant to things.
or you're resistant to it, or it's because I'm like literally the only voice I can listen to. And sometimes you just can't even take the orders from yourself. And so sometimes have found myself reaching out for other therapeutic modalities, and I've stumbled upon some YouTube videos where they were doing some uh, you know, detachment and anxiety, because these two areas are very connected, I believe. Your
Yes.
anxiety and whatever you're attached to, and just I was having a hard time letting go of something. Anyway, it just like within 5 minutes, I'm feeling like totally relieved, totally relaxed. So, um,
Yeah.
that
And
I
part of that's scientific because within 5 minutes, you can decrease your cortisol up to 43%
that's
by
crazy.
doing that. So it's like,
Yeah.
it's no coincidence that it was about that time period for you.
Yeah, yeah, that's I mean, it's crazy how effective it can be. But, kind of getting back to even before that, just kind of diving in a little bit more to the nervous system itself. Why is regulating and something we probably don't really think about, especially as, busy entrepreneurs. It's like, oh, I gotta, regulate my business, let alone regulate my nervous system. Like how important is that when it
Well,
comes
for
to our success?
for me, I couldn't regulate my business until I regulated my nervous system. So pretty darn important, I would say. But I think that it's kind of this buzzword and people don't really understand the importance of it. And the nervous system and your amygdala, especially that little almond-shaped part of our brain, that's in charge of fight, flight, freeze, flee, fawn, all of those things that F us up throughout our life and make things difficult. So, yeah, it's a huge thing when you can actually do something like EFT that goes directly to that part of your brain. Because while you're tapping and while you're addressing the negative aspects of something, it's going right there. It's bypassing the frontal lobes that we are normally accessing with talk therapy
Yeah,
and going right to that center of our brain and calming it. And also releasing those energetic blockages that happen at our meridian endpoints where we kind of store the trauma or
yeah,
the bothersome memories or the dis-ease itself. So I never really thought about it when I was younger, like the times when I would just feel anxious or the times I didn't understand like what it felt like to be dysregulated
yeah.
and to kind of like I would sometimes just kind of have this almost like buzz about me. And sometimes it was almost like physical shaky kind of buzz and sometimes it was just kind of like, where am I going next? And part of that I know was my ADHD, but
Hmm.
I think a larger part of it was probably that my nervous system was just like all over the place and very dysregulated. So once I actually could feel what it was like to be in a regulated state, it's
Yeah.
like total relief. I say it's like going from being in like the front row or like the mosh pit at a concert and that's your life.
Where
And
you're
then
just sort
all of
of
a
bouncing
sudden
around, no
yeah, like
control.
I mean, somebody's like crowd surfing over your head and it doesn't quite feel safe. It's exciting maybe, but it doesn't, you're on alert and
Yeah.
you're a little bit kind of frenetic and chaotic. And then when I do a round of tapping, it's almost like I just rise up into the presidential suite and I can just see, like, I can still get a great view of the concert. I can see everything, everybody, but it's relaxing and it's
Yeah.
safe. And I have a new perspective, that
Yeah.
reframe.
Yeah. That's amazing. That as and so we're bouncing a few words around that don't get talked about too much on the show here. So for the audience that isn't familiar with like these, like the meridians and the amygdala, let's break down a little bit of the science on like what that actually is. So can you start with because you mentioned regulating the where the fight or flight is stored in the amygdala, but what exactly is that, like how does one get in touch with and understand that their amygdala?
Hmm. I don't really know how to put it in terms of understanding our amygdala, but I can say that those responses that we have from that fight, flight,
Yeah.
freeze, flee,
Mm-hmm.
fawn,
Mm-hmm.
those are things that used to only be triggered during really like big things happening,
Yeah.
like earlier in cavewoman days or whatever, we're being chased by the saber-toothed tiger, or we're, something life threatening,
Yeah.
or perhaps we're facing starvation because there's not enough food. Something big is
Yeah.
happening to trigger that.
Yeah.
The problem nowadays is that our stress response is being triggered by little things,
Yeah.
like, maybe it's being interviewed. Perhaps my stress response could be being triggered right now because you're interviewing me. I don't think it is, but for a lot of people, speaking is something that triggers that. Or
Absolutely.
maybe it's just the people who are in your work environment
Hmm.
get you anxious and stressed. But our body doesn't see that any differently or treat that any differently than those bigger things that actually threaten our life. And so the bigger problem there becomes that when we're in those life or death situations that aren't really life or death situations, our body is turning off the
Hmm.
things that are not necessary.
Yeah.
And those are not really things that are meant to
Like
be
our
turned off.
digestion and things like that. Yeah.
Exactly. Exactly. So, yeah, our digestion, our metabolism, like all sorts of things are getting like shifted around so that we can conserve what we need to survive,
Got
but our
it.
life's not being threatened.
Yeah. No,
So,
that
our
makes sense.
health takes a major toll, and we're spending time in all of these cortisol spikes, and, that leads to heart issues, all sorts of health issues that can stem from that and lead to other problems. So, being able to understand when you're in those states, when you're in freeze or you're in flight or whatever, allows you to be able to get back to a regulated state where you're not there and to notice the difference. For me, that was honestly the biggest thing. And I think that's one of the biggest thing my clients walk away from when they work with me is understanding where they are, when they're there, and how to get back to a place that feels really good and comfortable where they can function and do what they want to be doing.
Yeah. Said another way, it comes down to the perceived danger
Yes.
versus real danger. Like we're not actually in any danger, but it's our perception
Yes.
and it's our relationship with the things that, we're making meaning out of oh, we're running late for work
Right.
or, something and our brains are confusing running late for work or something that's really not a real threat, but it's confusing that
A
with a
response
real
does not
threat
match
and
the
it's
threat.
releasing those crazy hormones, the cortisol, and that's having a negative impact on us.
Exactly.
So now getting into another term that my audience isn't necessarily familiar with are the meridians. So you talked about tapping into the meridians. So what are those and how do they help us with this nervous system regulation?
Yeah, so our meridian system is something that goes throughout our entire body and it has endpoints in it. It's through what our life force flows. So our life force flows through these energetic channels in our body. And that also is where, if we have a bothersome memory or something happens, something can get kind of blocked between those. So the major ones that we're using when we are doing EFT are like the side of our hand, the top of our head. There's some spots around the eye, under the nose, under the mouth, our collarbone, and then under our arm.
Mhm.
And it's really cool because we actually have these in many places in our body. If you've ever gone and had acupuncture done or looked at an acupuncture chart,
Yeah.
that's where you can really see like how many of these places there are in your body to tap into and release things. And most people, even if you haven't had acupuncture, have probably had a massage at some point or another and felt release through that. And that's also using your meridian system to release things through your body. So these are not uncommon parts of the body to tap into, but what ended up happening was Gary Craig, who ended up, creating emotional freedom techniques as we
Mhm.
know it, realized that the points that I just mentioned, the 9 major points, are basically all you need to do an energetic overhaul of the entire
Mm.
system. So,
Mm.
while there are other points that we can tap into and they're lovely and there's no reason to avoid any of them, you can pretty much do an overhaul on whatever your issue is, whatever the challenge, whatever the dis-ease with those points and get a great result.
Amazing. And so essentially, what's happening, the way I'm understanding it, is that the reason why we get that instant relief, or pretty quick relief, is because when we tap on those energy points, in with that are part of the meridian system, that it's just releasing that stuck energy.
Yes. And while we're tapping on it, we're talking about the issue.
Hmm.
And we're addressing the negative aspects of it in a world that loves us to just like get positive about things immediately and gloss over the fact that we like kind of need a voice for these things, these emotions that want to move within us. And that kind of aligns with those spots where things get stuck. And it's like, yeah, that's it. And it lets go, you
Yeah.
know? So it gets to have a voice and it does what energy wants to do. It moves up and out.
Yeah, there's a part in one of my seminars, where we do a little bit of EFT. And I'm not trained in it necessarily, but I did teach a little segment on it. Just something that I had learned. And so, but it was just fun. It was just kind of funny because everything we talk about in law of attraction and manifestation, is always on the up and up. It's always happy. It's always focus on what you want. And I'm like, okay, we're going to get a little interesting here. We're going to do something a little against the normal grain. And we're going to talk about things, in a little bit more of a negative way, but there's a
Yeah.
reason for it. So can you kind of, give us a little bit of that dialogue and what it sounds like?
Yeah. So instead of just like, let's think of an issue, perhaps like a headache or something like that.
Okay. Yeah.
Instead of just speaking to the headache like it's gone and it's not there anymore, we're acknowledging the headache. So we might start on the side of our hand with, even though I've got this awful headache, I love, accept, and forgive myself. Love, acceptance, and forgiveness is at the heart of the transformation anytime you're using emotional freedom techniques because and this would be the same for hypnotherapy too. I mean, if we can really cultivate genuine love, real
Hmm.
authentic love, acceptance, and forgiveness, where's the problem?
Yeah.
It doesn't exist anymore.
Yeah.
So we're setting up the thing by talking about what the problem is and addressing that. And then we tap through the points, starting at the top of the head. And then we're just going to describe that headache, all the little nitty gritties about it. Oh my gosh, it hurts. It's so bright. Everything, I just want to go sleep. I feel it in my temples, feel it in it. Just, you complain. Just complain and address it where it is, where you feel it, how it feels. Is it stabbing? Is it aching? Does it have a color? Does it have a texture? Like get really nitty gritty about what's going on with what you're feeling.
Hmm.
And you'll probably notice even that first time you're tapping through it, movement
Yeah.
in the pain and the sensations. Actually, emotional freedom techniques is techniques because there's a bunch of different techniques. A lot of people like to shorten it and think it's just technique, but there's actually a whole bunch of different techniques that make it up. And when we're working with physical pain, that's actually called chasing the pain. So we'll start to
Mm.
notice that the pain begins to move. And then as
Mm.
we go through the second time, and if I'm working with a client, I'm kind of talking with them and asking them like, what's going on with that pain now? Where do you feel it? And then we kind of talk to it there. Oh, now it's moved down to my neck and, I feel it here and it's achy and dull, but I'm still feeling it. And we're kind of tapping through the points, talking about it. And only when it actually feels genuine are you flipping it to the positive
Yeah. Yeah.
or flipping it to the opening up to the positive. I'm open to the idea that I can let this headache go. I'm open to the idea that it's not really serving a purpose for me anymore. It's safe for me to go about my business, do my day, whatever. And again, only if that feels aligned. Because,
Yeah.
kind of like with affirmations and things where we go a little bit too far out of what we're actually feeling,
Yeah.
sometimes I like to say that kind of causes like goal trauma. Like we have that kind of like backlash where it's like it was too big of a jump and then all of a sudden we're right back where we started. So we want to kind of take those little steps. But the idea with addressing the negative is that there's a root to that problem somewhere, and we're going to find it by actually acknowledging it, seeing it, and letting it know that we understand it.
Interesting. No, that's a really good explanation. And so I think this is a really good segue to move into a little bit more of the manifestation aspects of this because, that's what this show
Mhm.
deals with. And so, and I know that for you, you are also a manifestation and law of attraction expert. And so let's shift that now that we kind of have an understanding on a physical level, some things that you can do literally with your physical body and getting the the nervous system regulated. How does this help with manifestation? And before we even talk about that, let's even take a step further back. In your opinion, how does manifestation really work? And why do people get stuck when they're trying to manifest something?
Yeah, great questions. I always like to look at manifestation not just through the law of attraction, but also through our energy portals, our chakra system,
Mm-hmm.
because I kind of believe like every thought or idea that we have, there it is, like up in the seventh chakra, where we are just full of possibility. There's endless possibility up there, right? Like we can dream it, we can achieve it, it's all good. And then in order to bring it into physical reality, it's got to drop all the way down through all the chakras to the root. That's where things become rooted in physical reality.
Mm-hmm.
But the problem that we have is that if our energetic vortexes, if our chakras are not open,
Mm-hmm.
spinning freely, healthy, then we can kind of manipulate that original seventh chakra thought or idea into something totally different. Like, let's just say somebody wants to manifest a great, like a new business, or you have this great new idea for a business, and you start to kind of move the idea down, and it's got to go through, your third eye. It's got to go through your throat chakra. This is where a lot of people get caught up with like not being able to voice what they want, share it
Mm-hmm.
in the world the way they want to, bring it out that way.
Yeah.
Might get twisted because maybe as they voice it, they're not voicing it authentically, or they're not, sharing it with the right people or whatever. So there's a place where it can kind of get like mangled a little bit. Then it's going to kind of drop down to our heart chakra. We've all heard the phrase, no, her heart's not in it.
Yep.
And that,
Yeah.
so there's a way that, I mean, our heart can be our greatest cheerleader and supporter, and it's also amazing at helping to cheerlead and support others. But then, there's the flip side where, it kind of works against us if it's not open.
Yeah.
So things can get kind of messed up there if we're not open. And when we get into those lower chakras, that's where so much, at least in the work that I do, I see a lot of childhood issues come up and
Mm-hmm.
things that have kind of caused our feelings of lack of worthiness or not enoughness, ideas around money, all that kind of stuff. So things can really kind of get funny down there too. And sometimes instead of manifesting that amazing, business idea or business, instead we manifest like tons of work, all these hours we didn't want to do. We're underpriced, we're overworked, we're overwhelmed, and maybe we still have the business. Maybe we're still doing the thing, but it didn't turn out the way that we originally imagined it. So having our nervous system regulated, having our chakras clear allows that clear manifestation channel. I always kind of envision it like a game of like Plinko, like on The Price is Right. And you're like dropping it down from up here, and then like it's like where's it going to bounce around and go? And you want it to just go right to like the
Yeah. Oh, that's a
jackpot.
wonderful analogy. So you kind of are describing it a little bit more like as a top-down approach where,
Mhm.
like you get the download, you get the information from the universe, and then, like how does it sit in your crown chakra? How does it sit in your third eye? How does it sit in your throat chakra
Mhm.
and on down?
Yeah.
And then, wherever it is that you're getting stuck, that's where the energy ultimately in your chakra needs to be cleared.
Yes.
And that's interesting. Now, and so would you say that let's say you get stuck at your throat chakra, is that you start to do the work there, where you get, or where do you start?
I like to start from the bottom up with the
Yeah.
work.
Yeah.
So I always start at the lowest chakras, which
Yeah.
honestly, that lower half of the chakra system is usually the one where it's like nobody doesn't have issues there. So,
Yeah.
there's always something that we can find there. And I personally like to go back as far as we can go, at least
Hmm.
to like when somebody came into this physical world and just clear things. Because the way I look at it with the nervous system and the chakra system, and even through the lens of hypnotherapy, like if we can like knock down those early dominoes and figure things out from there, then it takes care of all the ones that happened that were similar to it that were more recent.
Yeah.
So to me, that's a much more effective way to go about working than trying to deal with what's happening in the present moment that feels like it's a challenge, going back and kind of starting that domino rally from the furthest point back and just letting it knock it all over.
Yeah, no, that makes perfect sense. It's so amazing that you bring up, correlating manifesting law of attraction with chakras because way back when I was figuring out what book I was going to write and how my 8 manifesting conditions which originally came together. I did have this idea that those 8 manifesting conditions were going to correlate with, but I just, not being completely trained in the whole chakra system, I didn't really want to necessarily open up that can of worms, because it's like I don't want to spend the rest of my time talking about chakras, even though it is a minor interest. It's not a
Yeah.
major interest.
It's not I wouldn't say it's a major interest of mine. It's just
Yeah.
made it all make sense.
Yeah, yeah.
I often work with people who, and a lot of people I think feel like chakra systems kind of like woo. I find it to be very practical. And I
Mhm.
love things that are like scientifically based. But when I am working with people who aren't really as woo as I am, I
Yeah,
don't even have to bring it up, but I can still use the engineering of it to make
yeah,
sense of the issues and to work through them.
absolutely. No, I love that. I love that. So you talked a little bit about helping people to overcome goal trauma and procrastination, so that they can realize their dreams. So can you enlighten us a little bit more? You mentioned the word goal trauma, but I'd like to elaborate on that a little bit more.
Yeah. For me, when I see people that have been through trying to manifest a certain goal,
Yeah,
sometimes multiple times,
yeah.
and failing, that's where I usually feel like there's some goal trauma here. There's like something behind this. I dealt with this. I can use my own parallel here. I dealt with this when I was writing my book that just came out.
Hmm.
And uh, I tried several times on my own to write it. And it wasn't until this year that I surrounded myself with the right people to do it that I was able to do it. But what ended up happening back in 2021 when I was, we can call it failing. I don't really think of it as failing, but when I failed the second time at doing it on my own, um, I used emotional freedom techniques and I used nervous system regulation to just let go of the project. So I was having all this resistance. I was trying to like push it out into the world, trying to write, trying to, do the things and make it happen. Make
Yeah.
it happen is like always upstream, and there's, there's nothing that we ever really want that's up there. It's always downstream. So I was like trying to like paddle the canoe upstream and do all that. And I was finally like, you know what? It's not meant to happen right now.
Hmm.
And because I was regulating my nervous system, I was able to make the connection that I wasn't self-sabotaging. I wasn't, I wasn't procrastinating. It just wasn't aligned. So
Hmm.
from that place, I did a round of EFT tapping and I wrote a very similar round into my book so that other people can do this if they need to let go of things.
Yeah.
Um, and I let it go. And after I did that, it was really easy. I took all the tasks related to it off my to-do list and I just freed my mind of it. And you know what ended up happening was that the resistance went away. And
Yeah.
over that next year, I was doing a lot of podcast guesting, much like I'm doing here with you now. And through doing that and through going back to, I'd been doing group work, I went simply one on one with my clients for that year. And I really dialed in like, what does the world need from me? Like, what
Hmm.
am I here to really bring? What does this book need to be about? Really digging into the why and just letting it come to me through that without an expectation that it was going to be the book, but just kind of like, hey, where are we going next? And everything just unfolded beautifully for me once I was able to release the resistance.
Yeah.
So that was a huge part of it for me. And yeah, there's a fine line between procrastination and self-care even, and for me it was more caring for myself and caring for my business and what it needed to become, to let it go for a little bit than it would have been to keep pushing.
Oh, I can I can so relate. I feel like I probably have been experiencing goal trauma this whole last year with the significant delay of my app.
Oh, I
And
can imagine.
I'm at the very, very, very like this thing could launch any day now. But even as I mean, I've been learning things so much along the way. But what you just mentioned, I can relate to so much. And the way I interpret that is like just yesterday, I was out for a beautiful hike. And even before that, I was just thinking about like, well, I mean, what's keeping me from, because there's been days where I just sit in here and I don't go out and experience my life, and
Yeah.
it's like, why not? Like what's really going to change, once this app, is done that right now is
Right.
preventing me from just getting out and enjoying my life. Like let's just act the same way I would be acting as if it was released. And
Right.
yesterday for the first time I realized, I turned on some music. I don't normally do that anymore when I just for whatever
Oh,
reason I hadn't been turning
no.
on music. And I turned on some music and it almost brought tears to my eyes.
Oh my
It's just
gosh.
like it just released something in me. And I did that and I had like the highest vibration I have had in a
Mm.
very long time.
Oh, I just
And what
got
do you know?
goosebumps everywhere.
I know. And it's like, what do you know? The universe, the universe, Apple approved.
You know we have a problem when the universe has become Apple.
Exactly. Approved my app, and so at least we're like that's a significant energetic shift that took place for
Yeah.
me yesterday that
Oh my
kind of
gosh.
allowed this the way I look at it, it's not so much that Apple approved it, it's I mean, that it's that it was a sign from the universe that like everything's going to be okay.
Yes. See, this resonates with me for so many reasons. A, because it was just my book launch this week, so I feel a lot
Oh,
of that same energy and a
congratulations.
lot of
Yeah.
that same. And I've got to say, like, as somebody I look up to with everything that you've done, it was so cool to see my book and yours dancing together on the charts on Monday. I became an international bestseller on launch day, and it was
Congratulations.
amazing.
Thank
Thank you.
Oh, that's awesome. Oh,
And
congratulations.
I made this deal with myself when I started the book this time, and this is why I think I was getting chills listening to what you had to say. Um, I was only going to write this book if I wrote every sentence of it through the lens of pleasure.
Yes.
And so back in the springtime, when I committed to doing it again with the right people, the right help, and all the support, I actually I enrolled in pleasure boot camp. I brought, music back into my life too, because it had been somehow absent, even though I love it dearly.
Yes.
And I also embraced, I mean, I always have walked my talk, but I really, really walked it in every step of it this past 6 or 8 months because I truly believe that slow is the new fast and that our nervous
Mhm.
system, appreciates being in slowness more than
Mhm.
anything. So taking the time to really slow down for me, both, as a very ambitious entrepreneur and also, having ADHD, I need to slow down and yet it's very not intuitive.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I took a lot of time this year to just be in slowness and be in pleasure. And I can tell you, nothing speeds up quite as much as when you do that, because that's the fuel. That's exactly what we need to be able to communicate with the universe and to be in touch with our intuition and to really feel all the things that we're wanting to feel. And it's like, what are we waiting for?
Absolutely.
It's not going to be any different after the app launches, after the book launches, after whatever. So I just made sure to enjoy every part of it, to share all the parts with my kids as I was doing it. My kids were such awesome support as I was writing the book, and my husband, and to just make it this just part of our lives, not a be
Yeah.
all end all, but just this beautiful thing that was evolving. And so many things in my life improved through the process of writing the book because I had to reface and further heal and do so much work in order to birth it into the world.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's also like, I don't know, this is also just bringing in some other teachers that have been on this show, but it's like that's slowing down is like that's tapping into the more powerful feminine energy,
Mhm.
which is inviting rather than pushing, it's allowing
Yes.
us to be in that receive mode. And like you said, I mean, there's nothing that speeds things up faster than slowing things down.
Yes.
And that
Yes.
makes so much sense. And so, tell us a little bit about your book, and what readers can expect to learn about themselves, and especially in terms of, how people can manifest more success in their business and more love and abundance.
Absolutely. So the book is really going to help people. This journey of becoming is never ending, right? So my goal is to make it one that people want to enjoy and be present for. Realizing that the only place that we can do anything with our power is in the present moment, while so many of us are leaking it to the future or the past, and it's not right here with us where we can actually do something with it. So people are going to learn how to do that, how to harness their power, where they might be leaking it. It's an interactive book. There's a lot of actionable steps in it and a lot of stories where you're going to be able to really connect the dots in your own life, even if your stories aren't the same.
Yeah.
So I've written into it EFT and even hypnotherapy. There's a full like bonus resource website with audios and videos and other
Ooh.
things, and a full like 8-week coaching program that's provided with it too. So there's a lot of ways that people can really step into their power and take action on these things while also reading what I'd like to think is a pretty entertaining story.
Lovely, lovely. And then also for our listeners, you're offering, tell us a little bit about this, the privatesessions.com that you're offering.
Oh yeah. So if you go, I'm actually giving it away with my book right now, and it's also accessible by going to theprivatesessions.com. It's a resource full of over 60 different videos that I've done with other podcast hosts like yourself, where we've recorded EFT sessions on countless different topics. So it's jam packed full of like expert tips and advice and ways to personalize these sessions so that you can make them get you different shifts in your energy. Lots of really great stuff in there. So if there's something that you're struggling with or finding challenging right now, you can probably find one or more sessions in there that's going to speak directly to it and help you get a shift.
Amazing. And you can get that at the privatesessions.com.
Yes.
Amazing. Well, this has been enlightening and really entertaining, really enjoyable. I get something amazing out of every podcast. And,
Yeah.
you've definitely contributed to my life as well as I know my listeners as well. So I just really appreciate you. And I am really excited about your book. Your book again, one more time, is called
Becoming More Me, Tapping into Success, Subconscious Secrets of an ADHD Entrepreneurial Mom.
Love it, love it. Well, I encourage our listeners to go pick themselves up a copy. It's already launched, it's already out on Amazon, and it's been doing well and already made international bestsellers. So congratulations to that.
Thank you.
And thank you so much for being a guest on the Power of Your Mind podcast.
Thank you for having me, Victoria.
Thank you.